Hey, I'm on my laptop again today, and I can't get my camera to work on it. I don't know if you remember that.
No,
Okay.
it's no big deal. If you don't have access to it, fine. If you do, please do. And as usual, please interrupt me as I'm speaking by either just waving at me, or in the case if you don't have your camera, just speak up and ask questions if you have any. Okay. Okay, so before we begin, any questions on anything? Yes, we're going to get to cover your first presentation, and we're going to talk again, which is the collage. We'll talk again about your second presentation, which is the quotation, when we look at the schedule here in just a minute. And I've got some new content today, which relates to some of your reading and stuff like that. So it should be a relatively manageable amount of stuff, though. We're going to jump around on a few different topics as we move to ethics, and I'm going to assign you another long-term project, which is due weeks and weeks from now. But if you have any opportunity to get started on it, it'd be good to get going soon. So any questions before we begin now? All right, good. This is, of course, our last remote class. And hopefully really is our last remote class. We won't have some strange switch to remote later on, because this really is meant to be an in-person class. And next class, remember, you will be in person in our classroom, which is, let me just look to be sure, 249 Hawkins, upstairs in Hawkins Hall, in the corner back by the parking lot side of the building. It was a really good classroom last semester. I had the same one, and it's set up for like even socially distanced, like 20 some people or something, but it actually doesn't feel too overly big, which is always a problem with the social distancing. And just to remind you, I imagine most of you, maybe you had in-person classes last semester, but maybe you didn't, because there's not been a lot of them. But yes, as you know, you're going to have to wear your mask whenever you're inside the building. It's one of the other reasons not to bring food or stuff to the building, because to the classroom, because you're not going to be allowed to take your mask off to eat or anything during class, and that would be distracting anyway. And when you come in, there will be hand sanitizer there and towels and spray for you to clean your desks. Honestly, I want you to do that. It would be definitely to clean your hands and to do the desk too. Honestly, from what we know now about the virus and surfaces, surfaces are nowhere near as big an issue as once was thought, but we still clean the desks. Your hands are important. And yes, when you're doing your presentations with your mask on, it's going to feel a little funny. And when I start off, it always feels a little funny for me to be teaching with a mask on. But really, you get used to it pretty quickly. And as I said before, some of you, especially if you work retail or other jobs like that, and maybe you did over the break, maybe you still do, you probably wear a mask a lot already, and you're used to it, so you get used to it. Okay, so that's what's going to happen for that online, that in-person class as we move from being online to in-person. And there's going to be a lot going on with testing and everything. I just want to let you know, as I've said before in email and stuff, but I've said so many things. If it happens that anybody tells you you need to do testing at a certain time, and that time is during our class, the administration agrees, you don't miss a class because of testing. You go before, you go after. Just go to a slightly different time, okay? I think they're having, the system's working out a little better this way to give you a little more flexibility in when you go, I believe, anyway. But anyway, if you get called to testing, you don't skip class for testing. You go before class, you go after class. Testing is no big deal. I think they're getting better at it. I went today. I go regularly. I have to every week also. In fact, I will be volunteering at the testing Wednesday mornings or something like that. So, hello, Casey. We're just getting started. If you do have your camera, please do turn it on. And we're going to, I'm going to now, if there's no questions, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we're going to jump into the schedule and go like that, okay? And then again, please ask questions as we go. Okay, we're in Moodle. We're looking at the daily schedule, and here we go. And today is class 4, required Zoom meeting. Ethics and plagiarism, yes. Rhetorical analysis, yes. Preparation for the quotation presentation, well, we kind of already did that, but I'll go over it again. So a number of different topics thrown in together today. What was due this class? For this class, you're supposed to have read chapter 5. So you've done chapters 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and hopefully you've been looking at using the study guide at the same time. If you don't, remember, you could have it on paper now, or when you get on campus, go to the info desk in front of just outside the main computer lab in Feinberg, the bottom floor of Feinberg, the info service desk. You got an email from me to remind you of this from some time ago, and you can pick up the big packet of papers, and then you'd have those ahead of time. Otherwise, I'll hand them to you first class, but it'd be nice too, because then you can actually do the study guide on the study guide itself. Otherwise, if you're working on just loose leaf paper or notebook paper, that's fine too. You can just attach it to it. But ideally, you should be doing the study guide as you do the reading. That's the most efficient thing. So that's something else, is work on your study guide. Chapter 5 is the last chapter that's going to be assigned for a little while. And in fact, chapter 5 is going to relate to some other handout, which I'm going to ask you to read for next class. Prepare and practice the collage. All right, let me talk about the collage. In fact, I'm going to stop the share for a moment just to do it, to remind myself to pick up my collage. Okay. You should be, if you haven't done your collage yet, I mean, made the collage and started to work out what you're going to say, it's definitely time to do it. But it's okay. You still have plenty of time. The goal is that you have the collage made and you have practiced by yourself or with a friend or in front of a mirror or all those things to get it going, know what you're going to say, have a flow, generally develop it. So that's all done and ready to go on Monday. Okay, and today's Wednesday. Now the collage itself, remember, it's just a regular size sheet of paper. Doesn't have to be colored paper like this, just a regular size sheet of paper. Can be loose leaf or torn out of a notebook or whatever. No big deal, not graded on the collage. It could be stuff you find in it. If you got any old newspapers or magazines around that you cut out, or catalogs or anything like that. It could be something off your printer. It could be a handwritten stuff, just drawings or something, and words. Some combination of those. You can use tape, you can use glue, you can use markers, crayons, pencils, pens, whatever it takes. Okay, and what's it about? It's going to depend on what you want to do. I did my presentation for you, and it was a pretty big scale, you know, the people, places, the activities, the jobs, and all about how they influenced me. That's okay, but maybe you just go on one thing. Maybe it's just about your pet and your relationship with your pet and things that have happened or something. It's just a smaller scale. That's fine, whatever you want to do. So it doesn't have to be, this is who I am. All right, so then you're going to, the idea is that on Monday, if you have it pretty well organized, you think you're pretty well ready, getting ready, then on Monday night and Tuesday night from 5 to 7 in the classroom, the TAs are going to be there. Actually, it's going to be, and let me see if I have this handout handy. There it is. Okay, I'm going to quickly share that with you. So I'm going to hand you this handout. Make it bigger. On in our first class, but you can see it right now. So it's going to be these first 3 presentations, which are the first 3 in-person weeks, and each was on a Wednesday each time. So it's a presentation on a Wednesday, a presentation on a Wednesday, a presentation on a Wednesday. Okay. Each of those weeks, the TAs are going to be available on the Monday and the Tuesday, as it explains here, from 5 to 7. And if you can copy down, or I will probably send this out in an email, and I'll be handing it out in person on Monday, this sheet. But this contact information is also already available to you in the syllabus summary on Moodle, right? So you go to one of those sessions, you practice twice. On the back of your rubric sheet, which you will have, either because you already picked up the packet or because I give it to you on Monday, the TA will record that you practiced, and then you'll be all set to do your presentation on Wednesday. If you have time and you have the ability, it'd be a great thing to go to an extra practice session and practice 2 more times, recorded with the TA. I suppose that's in addition to all the other times you practice on your own, right? And then you would get a bonus for your presentation. And any of those days, if you want to get in touch with me and set up a time on on Wednesday morning, you could come practice with me also on Wednesday morning. I'm not going to be sitting there waiting as the TAs will be. But if you make an arrangement with me, I can definitely do practice sessions on Wednesday morning. We'll see. At this point, it's possible I'll be doing some COVID volunteer work though, so that's going to be a question mark. But we'll see how it goes. Anyway, the other thing is your TAs are available for you at other times potentially, but you have to give enough notice. You can't just like an hour before you want to do a practice session, expect that they're going to be able to jump and do it with you. Like if you can talk to a TA in class or text them or email them a day ahead, maybe you can arrange some other time. Okay, so that's the speech coaching sessions. And you'll see at least you'll know this system, the way it's going to work for these first 3 weeks. You're not going to after that have a presentation like every week, because the presentations will require a little bit more planning time. And do remember, as it explains here, you must practice twice, which is just in one session, before you're allowed to do the presentation in class. And you have to do every presentation, but it all works out. Okay. Let me go ahead and stop.
Can the collage be made on the computer if we don't have access?
It can. It doesn't. I didn't want, if it's actually more comfortable to you, okay. It's just important that it just be a regular size sheet of paper. I don't want anybody making like a big posters or anything like that. No. Okay. If you find it easier to make something on the computer, that's okay. You can do that. But I don't want to say that you have to, because for some people that might be more time consuming. Okay. So think about that, but it's okay with me. So the only real rules for the collage are that it be a regular size sheet of paper, and don't ruin your life over making an art project. Okay, it's just a guide for yourself, and people in the back of the class won't be able to see it much anyway. It's okay. All right. Other questions about the collage? All right. So I'm going to talk about the rest of the schedule here as we're doing that. Then let me bring it back up again. Hold on. Okay, so that's the collage. And then it also says prepare your quotation presentation. Remember last class I did a couple of quotation examples. So that's going to be the second Wednesday, and it really is a low impact presentation. All you got to do is be able to speak a quotation and say who said it. Okay, but you still need to practice it twice, even though it only takes like 10 seconds to do the presentation or something, right? You still need to go to a practice session. So you better start thinking about what quotation you're going to use. Okay, it could be from books, movies, TV shows, from history, from whatever you like. You can just go Google famous quotations if you wish, or quotations about some topic you're interested in, and then you could look through that. But maybe you already know something. Maybe something as soon as that came up, maybe something came to you that this is a quotation that you find meaningful to you. All right, so let's do next class. I'm asking you to read a handout called Structuring Presentation Information, which is on the Moodle front, and I'll show you that in just a moment. Oh yeah, remember the advisor interview has been assigned now, And you either have the handout if you picked up the packet, or it's sitting there on the Moodle front. And I went over last class all the the interview tips. Interviewing tips, advisor interview. Advisor interview, yeah, it's not due until March 3rd, but it'd be really good if right away you send an email to your advisor saying, hey, I've got to set up an interview with you for class. Please, let's arrange something. Can we do something on Zoom or phone, or what's the best way? And can we do something next week or something? And then make up your questions, go do your interview, take down all your notes, type them up, and you'll have that all done long in advance of it. Which would be great, because if you wait too late and then they're out of town or something, or they don't get back to you because they're busy or something, that'll be bad. Work on the study guide again, it says, practice the collage and pick a quotation, practice the quotation presentation. That's the schedule. I'm just going to go back here to show you on the Moodle front these handouts in this area called Remote Week classes here. All these handouts are again repeated usually I just put everything in assignments and handouts because I usually give you them in person. I brought all these links out here also. So they're all in this folder too. But today I'm going to go over this Aristotle's rhetorical method handout, the SRAM model, quotation presentation rubric that's there for you to see what you'll be graded on with your quotation presentation. And I'll give you a hard copy of that later. And this is the handout I asked you to read for next class. So this is the topic. It's related to chapter 5. It's about structuring information. It's about specific purpose statements. If you read chapter 5, that should be familiar, but this is my version of it. And it's going to be really important as we move into the next parts of the class. We've kind of been jumping around different things, but now as we really start to make bigger presentations that require more structure, this whole topic area of that handout is going to be important. So please read that handout. That is in the schedule too. All right. And let me get this up for a second. I'm going to do that in a moment. Okay. All right. Any questions about the schedule, or anything I didn't cover, perhaps about the collage or anything else? No? All right. Good. All right. I know some of you may be a little apprehensive about getting into an in-person class when you probably have very few in-person classes coming up. Mine might be your only one, but it's going to be okay. And it'll be a nice change. Get out of your room, go to Hawkins, maybe even get a bagel afterwards or something. So, but if you want to talk about it, anybody wants to talk about it, get in touch with me. Everybody is having concerns about the in-person class. Please feel free to reach out to me. All right, so let me take a little sort of a tangent, but it really isn't. It relates to some things I've talked about. If you remember, when I was going over the handout on the managing your communication apprehension, one of the things I said was, well, one of the strategies you could use is you could try to reframe the situation. In other words, are you thinking of communication in some old-fashioned way, like I am the speaker, you are the receiver, here comes my message, boom. It's a one-way thing. All the pressure's on me, I'm the speaker. It's like it's all focused on me. Well, that could be a problem. That could increase your apprehension. So if you reframe the situation, I talked about some other models, right? And they're kind of informally kind of models. I didn't go into much detail on them. And this is just, we're not going to do a whole lot of communication theory in this class at all. But this is just a touch of it. If you looked at history, and we will be looking at Aristotle's rhetorical method and using some parts of it in an assignment, you'd see that the ancient Greek philosophers like Aristotle, they called the public speaking was a high art, right? It was great and to be admired, more than even writing and literature for some of them. And as an ancient Roman educator, Quintilian called it the good person speaking well. Okay, But they saw communication in that kind of old-fashioned idea. Like there's a speaker, there's a receiver, it's a one-way thing. And more modern models of communication, people talked about the interactional ping pong view. You can imagine ball bouncing both ways, right? I send you information, then you send me information, and so on. And then much more modern models, like your textbook actually describes a channel. There's a transactional or spiral model where communication is kind of happening back and forth at the same time, yes. But then your textbook goes further and describes it doesn't name a model, but describes a model which is like a channel with a message and with interference and then feedback and then a general situation, which is the overview, right? So I want to go a bit further than that. I want to give you a communication model, which maybe will be helpful for you to think about, or we'll just give you that idea that there is some theory behind this stuff. And it's Schramm's communication model. So, and this is a handout which is sitting there on Moodle, and you'll have it in your packet, and it's actually asked for in your study guide, and it'll be on the exam to be able to document, note the parts of Schramm's model of communication. And here's how it works. I hope you can all see it pretty well. Let me see if I can make that a little bit big, a little bigger here. Okay. So yes, we always begin. We always have a speaker, a source, and we always have a receiver, a listener. Sure, no big deal there. And the speaker does have an idea. But we get into a little more detail when we talk about the speaker doesn't somehow, how does the idea just get to the receiver? Is it some kind of magic or something? No, we have to encode it into words, right? It becomes a message. The message goes through this channel. You can see this is kind of a channel built between these two circles here. Before the receiver can reconstruct the idea, the reconstructed idea, the receiver has to decode it. So already we have all kinds of places where there's things can go wrong, I guess you could say. Things could be interpreted in different ways. Different kinds of meaning could come in, right? Or different kinds of interference could affect. Because the speaker has an idea, encodes it into words, it becomes a message, it's decoded by the receiver or listener, become a reconstructed idea. Then the idea is never the same as the reconstructed idea. So we have to imagine that whenever we're sending information to somebody, they're never getting exactly what we thought they were going to get. We do our best to try to figure out what happens, to try to make sure they get the idea that we want them to. And if you're dealing with ideas that were money, like if you're working in advertising, for instance, you would spend a lot of time studying this to try to imagine what happens to your idea and how can I make sure they get the idea that I need them to get, right? In our presentation, it's interesting to think about, but it's not quite so critical. Of course, this information is going back and forth because there's always feedback going back, which is being encoded into a message and then decoded. That even if the message is not verbal, right? Even if the message is other things that the person is doing, just their body posture. Even what's intended by body posture or subconsciously intended by it could mean something different when it gets back to the other side. So this process of sending information back and forth does have faults and failures in it sometimes, right? But we need to understand them. And that place, if you want to think about it, a real place where information goes back and forth, is a channel. And it's a pathway where the message is transmitted, right? So we have positive channels, the positive parts of our channel, and negative parts of our channel. So things that improve the communication and things that decrease the communication. Air, so it's necessary for our words, yeah. Light, things that improve the way we use the air, like microphones, that's all happening there. So that's good things to move it around. But then there's negative things. It's interference, noise or interference. So it could be physical noise. There could be a construction crew outside the window, jackhammering and stuff. That's going to influence the communication. It's going to degrade that channel. Could be psychological noise. Maybe there's something big going on everybody's talking about that just happened, like, I don't know, an impeachment trial. Could be. That kind of right here today is probably degrading the channel, right? Because it's like, oh, I just heard this terrible stuff on the radio or something, or maybe there's something else big going on. Maybe it's going to be the Super Bowl or something. And so that's all these things create psychological noise at the same time. Something else is happening though, as this idea is being sent as a message and then reconstructed. We, each of us, me as the speaker, if I am at the moment, and you as the receiver, if you are at the moment, have our own whole world view that we bring with us, which is going to influence how I encode that message, what I think I'm giving you, and then how you decode it and receive it. It's our field of experience, So you could call it our perspective or our worldview. And it's everything about us, that everything we know is filtered through it, and everything we know and we're sending out is filtered through it again, right? So direct experience, indirect experience, attitudes, values, beliefs, everything about us. And we have to realize that that stuff influences our communication, both in the way we send and receive messages. So the more we can find out about the people in our audience, that's one thing that can help us with communication, because we know where they're coming from, right? And it's not unusual when people are doing communication to try to take polls or surveys to figure out who their audience is and what they're really feeling, thinking, experiencing, believing, so on, right? But on the other hand, if I need to know myself and my own experiences and attitudes and beliefs and values, so I can know really where I'm coming from, and maybe some things that I'm carrying with me, which are going to make it, they're going to change the way that maybe it means the message that I'm sending is it really the message I thought I was sending, right? So I carry that my field of experience is influencing the message, and then how I receive the feedback too. Okay, so we've got a whole bunch of stuff going on here. I'll just add a little bit more. At the same time, we have this spiral of communication influenced by the channel in positive, negative ways, passing through a channel of positive, negative effects, and influenced by the fields of experience of both the senders and receivers. We have an environmental boundary, or a situation, or a context, if you want to say, which is like the whole world that influences that moment where we are. It's the space and the time kind of around us. And in some places, it's probably just the classroom, in our case, right? However, there could be other things that are just outside the classroom that are still influencing it. And in general, we talk about those things in terms of time and space. So like time, it's a little harder to get your head around, but like the time of day that our class is going to happen, right? Maybe like people are hungry or grumpy or tired or whatever because of the time. On the other hand, maybe the time I arrive early, I arrive late, you arrive early, you arrive late. That's going to influence the communication patterns also. But then space, some people spend their entire careers just working out space. The people who compose like why it looks like the way it does inside of McDonald's, for instance, which is highly structured and with certain ideas about how communication and also workflow and everything else happens there, right? How we build spaces to improve communication in cases of when we're worried about communication and not selling hamburgers, but how space works and how people live in spaces and work in spaces and travel through spaces. And like in our classroom, you know, if we were in a room and everything was jammed in together, that would be a very different experience than if we're in a room where people are so far apart they can barely feel like they're in the same room, right? So that whole environmental boundary, the space and time we're aware of at the moment, does influence our model of communication at the time. So that's as much theory as I'm going to give you, but that is something that's going to be on a test and in your study guide too. So that handout will help you with that. Okay. Probably no questions on that, but please, if there are any, let me know. Okay. So I said that the ancient Roman educator Quintilian called communication the good person speaking well. He actually said the good man speaking well, but we won't say it like that. Okay, the good person speaking well. And when I say that, it might make you think about good person speaking well. It's like there's definitely some value judgments there, right? But it's about good, which is kind of like about right, like right and wrong. Okay, we speak about things that are right and wrong. Then what we're really talking about is ethics. And there's a number of things, in especially chapter 2, about ethics. We talk about some ideas which might be a little bit strange to think of for some of you, the idea that you can have an ethical speaker, or that's maybe a little easy to understand, but an ethical listener, right? The ethics of speaking, the ethics of listening. But when I start to think about ethics, I'll just take a moment for a little tangent to talk about ethics in journalism. We don't do a lot of direct journalism in this class, but I'll do a little bit here. When we talk about right and wrong, we think about the journalistic rules that we live by, and they're actually good rules you can live by in lots of ways, and how you do your work, how you do your life. When we have the codes of ethics, and they're usually broken down into four points. And the primary one is to seek truth and report it as fully as possible. That's what we say. Seek truth and report it as fully as possible. That's our primary goal as journalists. So what does that really mean? Yes, it's an ethical code, but it means, yeah, we want to find the truth, but we don't just find some narrow truth. We want to find the broad truth. We want to find the context. We want to have, for instance, a diversity of sources and voices and ideas behind that truth. So it isn't a narrow truth, it's a broad truth that tries to encompass a number of different perspectives. Number 2, we minimize harm. So already we're acknowledging that the truths that we find, the truths that we speak and write can harm people. And sometimes it's unavoidable. But we are not doing it for that reason, and we try to minimize it. Okay, so that's number 2. Number 3 is act independently. In other words, if I'm a journalist, I shouldn't take bribes. I shouldn't be beholden to somebody. Shouldn't be controlled by anyone, except for my own ethics. So that means we also have to watch out for conflicts of interest. I shouldn't have even appearance that somebody should be pressuring me about something. So I don't do like stories about my boss or someone who I'm in a power relationship with, or my close friends, or things like that. People would know, even if I thought I was doing the great job being completely unbiased, that people might know that obviously he wrote that nice story about him because that's his best friend. And the 4th and last one, code of ethics, is to be accountable. Okay, so in this business, we've definitely had some ethical problems, and it's extremely important. We try to teach people from the very beginning. If you see somebody doing something wrong, if you see another journalist who is lying, for instance, or making stuff up, or plagiarizing material, you need to do something about it. We need to police ourselves and our profession. We have to be accountable. And when we make mistakes, we have to admit we make mistakes too, and we do. Okay, so that's a journalistic code of ethics. And if I'm talking about journalistic code of ethics, it might already bring up one of the major failings that in journalism today, and that is it's been so many cases, it's plagiarism, and it's actually a problem here in college too. Right? Now, plagiarism is brought up in some detail in one of your chapters. I think it's chapter 2. And they talk about 3 forms of plagiarism, and that is on the study guide. Maybe you've already done that portion of the study guide too. 3 forms of plagiarism. And it's probably useful to try to break them up and say, it's global plagiarism or patchwork plagiarism and how those work. And that's fine. But as long as you get the general idea, though, it's okay with me. After you do the study guide and you detail those things, plagiarism obviously is using somebody else's work and calling it your own. Okay, using somebody else's words usually and calling it your own. So we frequently quote from other sources, have sources, and say where information came from. Having good sources gives us credibility. but we don't just take stuff and not credit people. That's not usually the problem. I suppose you can kind of slip into plagiarism by accident by using a little more and a little more and a little more, but that's not usually how it happens. Usually it happens because, you know, later in the semester, we've got some kind of big informative presentation due, and you were supposed to do research on it, and then you were really busy with other stuff, and then you got sick and who knows what, and now it's due like in a couple of days, and you've got to pull the presentation together, and you know, you could say it's laziness, you could say it's lack of planning, you could say it's bad luck, but you get into a bad situation. And you go online and you steal from somebody a presentation or parts of a presentation and call it your own and do it, right? And maybe you get away with it. But if you do, it's a dangerous, slippery slope, just to warn you. First of all, this is a journalism class. And if you get caught for academic dishonesty, for instance, which is most commonly plagiarism, in the journalism class, there are severe repercussions. So just be aware of that. Also, I think I can predict. I think I can predict who's going to be a plagiarist. At least I can tell you, the person who plagiarizes is the person who's done it before. Right? It's like a drug. Once you start doing it, you keep doing it. It's a hard habit to break. So if you think you have a problem with this, like I would say to you, if you thought you had a problem with drinking or something else, if you think you have a problem with it, you got to deal with it, and you got to stop it, because you will get caught, and it can be certainly extremely destructive to an academic career. It can be professionally suicidal, because people do get caught because you keep going back to it. So that's the best predictor of who's going to plagiarize is someone who's done it before, and almost nobody gets caught on the first time. That's the thing. So let me just put that out there as a caution. If you're doing any work for me, or actually for some other class if you like, and you're not sure, geez, is this right, me presenting this material like this? Could this be plagiarism? Ask me about it. Right? I'd be happy to look at it for you. Okay. Speaking of ethics, that's what I'm kind of doing here. Let me go back to the ethical speaker, the ethical listener, just because those were interesting ideas I thought in the text, and ones that are maybe a little bit new to you. So what's ethical about being a speaker? Well, one thing is, the ethical speaker is prepared. So it's unethical to show up for a presentation day and not really be prepared, right? We don't want to listen to stuff that's not really very well put together. It's kind of unethical to ask people to listen to you if you're not prepared. So that's part of it, being an ethical speaker. Another thing is, of course, to be honest, to seek the truth. So in that way, it's like a journalism principle, but it's a principle of public speaking, to be honest, to seek the truth. Another one is to avoid name calling. In some way, you could call this minimizing harm, but it's true. Sometimes our language in our common speech with people or friends and so on can be pretty coarse, and sometimes pretty cutting and biting, and sometimes maybe even worse than that, maybe even prejudiced or offensive. So we don't bring that language into, frankly, you should watch out for that language anyway, but certainly don't bring that language into the classroom. We have to be as welcoming to everybody with our language as possible. And we're trying not to be biased or offensive in our language, or abusive in our language. So avoid name calling, for instance. And then finally, there is some ethics in the topics that you pick. For instance, when we very soon start talking about specific purposes and purpose statements and so on, and going over topics and how they would work, how they fit in different categories. One of the things that would rule out a topic was it'd be unethical. So for instance, would you be allowed to do a presentation, or should you be allowed to do a presentation on how to cheat on your taxes, or how to mail drugs through the mail, or something like that? No, right? That'd be informative, maybe, but it would be unethical. So that's the ethical speaker. Ethical listener, you have a real important job to do as a listener in class and in general. And one of the most important parts of it is being ethical, and that means being attentive. It would be unethical to play with your phone while someone else is speaking, especially doing a prepared presentation. especially when it's only going to last 3 minutes, right? It would be unethical to prejudge them, to try to judge what you thought of that presentation based on like the way they looked or their accent or something like that, some other superficial characteristic. Everybody's different, but we try to really look at what they're saying, right? Avoid prejudging them. So we want to, the third thing is we want to maintain a free and open expression. We want to make sure everybody feels comfortable speaking, so therefore we have to be the kind of listeners that encourage that. I encourage you to think about that as you're listening to the presentations a week from today. And then it's okay to have fun, to laugh at a joke when someone makes one, but we're trying to still be we're trying to be welcoming to everybody who's speaking. Okay, and now I'm going to do some more about ethics. In a way, I'm going to talk about and present another long-term assignment that you're going to have to put in that big list of things you have to do, but a lot of them not due right away, but you have to make sure you keep organized and pay attention to when they're due. But I'll be reminding you repeatedly. So I'm going to talk about a different way of thinking about ethics, about the base word for ethics, which is ethos. And when I talk about ethos, I'm talking about Aristotle's rhetorical method. And you have a handout on Moodle, and you will have it on paper if you pick up your packet, or next class, I'll give you the packet if you haven't picked it up yet. You need to understand the basics of Aristotle's rhetorical method and how we can use it to analyze speeches, and you can use it to prepare your speeches too. You can use the ideas behind it, but you're going to at least be assigned to analyze a speech using Aristotle's rhetorical method. The handout that this information is on is really just one side. The rhetorical method is it's a pretty simple ideas. We simply break up the information, the presentation, and the information together into 3 categories, into ethos, pathos, and logos, right? Those are the 3 categories that Aristotle thought were most important in the way we present information. He called it rhetoric, and people who do this and study are rhetoricians. Rhetoric as in, you could say that's public speaking, rhetoric is. You could say rhetoric is argument, right? Also, it's the same kind of idea, or persuasion, perhaps is another way to put it. And it's true, we're going to break down our presentations in terms of informative presentations and persuasive presentations. But actually, even in informative presentations, we have to persuade people that the information is useful. So it all becomes rhetoric. Okay, so then you have to understand, what is ethos, what is pathos, what is logos. And we'll start with ethos, which Aristotle said was the most important of those. In fact, so much so that he divides ethos up into 3 kind of subcategories. And you're going to need to do that when you analyze a presentation. Some people think ethos means ethics, and there's an element of that there, but it's really the base of ethics. It's ethics, but it's more than that. It's character, it's credibility, it's competence. Some people will remember it by those 3 C's: character, credibility, competence. And we'll go beyond that. It's also just the general feeling that you bring about whether you are believable, whether you are trustworthy, right? So it's a bigger idea than just ethics. But imagine if someone thought you were unethical, you would definitely have a problem with ethos in your presentation, right? So ethos is not static. It's always changing. It's like your reputation. And like a reputation, if you blow it, it's very hard to build it back, right? So we talk about ethos as both is developed by the way you present your information and by the information itself. And if you want people to believe you, it's the most important characteristic that you have there. So it's always changing. So we start with initial ethos. So initial ethos is like your ethos that you have before you even begin the presentation. It's from the way you walk up to the front of the class in our classroom, or some other presentation. Maybe you're on a program, maybe what kind of reputation some people might kind of know you already, right? And later in our class, it'll be the ethos that you carry with you because people have seen you do presentations before. So it's the stuff before the talk begins that you carry with you, your initial ethos. Credibility, competence, character, and ethics the speaker has before they begin talking. So it's how you hold yourself, how you stand, how you walk, how you stop and pause and look at people and keep eye contact and smile. That's your initial ethos. Then there's derived ethos, which is the same thing: character, credibility, competence, and ethics of a speaker, what they establish during their presentation. So the way you act during the presentation, does it sound like you really believe in this stuff, like you are someone who should be believed? Are the sources that you offer ones that make you sound competent and believable too? All right, so and then your mannerism, so both the content and then also the way you present it determines whether people will believe you. Then there's terminal ethos. Sounds terrible, but what all it really means is it's what, when you walk away from the presentation, when you're done, it's what people are left with. How believable you seem then. How much, again, credibility, competence, character, and ethics they think of you, they think you have when you're done and you walk away. When you walk back to your seat after you've done your presentation, what they're left with. So we hope, of course, that you have good initial ethos and that you build it to get better, and then you have great and terminal ethos at the end, so that when you walk away, people are really believing you and feeling good about the information and the way you presented it. Pathos is the second of these characteristics, and you can kind of get an idea of where that word comes from, or what words we have that are related to it. Like, how about the word empathy or empathetic, right? That pathos is at its root. Or the word pathetic, which is not like, has more meanings than we think of. We use the word pathetic like in a demeaning way, right? But the word pathetic actually also just has to do with emotion and feelings. So that's where this word comes from. And pathos is about emotions and feelings. It's using emotion to move an audience. And of course, we see this in like political speech and campaigning and in advertising and everything. All kinds of different emotions, sometimes quite negative ones being used. In advertising, people use a lot of guilt, for instance, and maybe lust, and maybe fear too, in political campaigns and advertising related to them, and political messages that people have, especially in some of these past political seasons. There's been a lot of fear in the messages, but it's using emotion. But you don't have to use negative emotions. You can use positive emotions. You can make people feel good, or at least feel sympathy. You can make people proud. So emotions are very powerful. They can backfire if people think that they're being manipulated. But we like to look at how people use emotions, and you like to plan how you can use emotion in your presentation to try to move people, in the case of persuasion, to agree with you or to come around in their attitudes. If you remember in my quotation discussion, I used a quotation from Maya Angelou, where she essentially said, and I'm paraphrasing now because I don't have it memorized any longer, that it isn't what you do or what you say. What people will remember is how you make them feel. How you make them feel. So that's what pathos is all about. And the other part about pathos is, when we look at people presenting and when we think of you presenting, is pathos is the being human, right? So being seen that we're human and genuine and real, like authentic. So if you come off as a phony sounding, that would give you a problem with pathos, because that's one of the reasons why you shouldn't be afraid to make mistakes, because that actually makes you seem more human, more real, and actually can improve your emotional appeal to people, and they're more likely to find your information believable. Finally, there's logos, which lots of people would say geez, shouldn't that be the first one? Logos, of course, relates to logic. It's more than just logic. It's a logical appeal, but it also has to do with organization too. So you bring, this is the stuff that you would normally think would be the most persuasive, but probably it's the least persuasive, but it's still very important because you may have tremendous ethos and you might have some great emotional appeals, but if you just don't have the information there, well, it's going to erode both those things, right? So if you reason effectively, you have, this happens because of this, and this is why you should do this. You reason effectively. You support your arguments with good sources, accurate, reliable, credible evidence, and then you organize your presentation properly. If you do those things, you'll have great logos. So in a lot of people don't pay attention to that last part, organization, right? So we've already talked briefly that you should be some structure to your presentation. We have an introduction, a body, a conclusion. We will soon be going over that in a lot more detail about what should go into each one of those. But just tell you, as a heads up, when you're thinking about your collage, perhaps, we like to try to get people's attention, and then an introduction, and then we also like to tell them what we're going to tell them, right? That's, or the organizational part of it, an introduction. Remember in my collage, I said essentially, and these are the people, places, activity. I told you what I'm going to tell you. I actually listed them, and then I went through, and then the body was actually in detail describing each of those things. And actually, the conclusion, we usually tell people again. Tell people what we're going to tell them. We tell them what we told them. Right. So that's one way to look at the structure. We're first getting attention at the beginning and at the very end, and then conclusion. Also trying to have some kind of a connection to the start, and maybe some kind of a, we call it a clincher. It kind of sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. Kind of like a drum roll, kind of like the big send off at the end, which is great when it works. Okay. So that's logos, that's organization. So I encourage you to look through that handout and look on the back of it, and you'll see what the assignment is. The assignment, which is not due until March 27th, which might seem like far, far away, but it'll happen so much sooner than you think, is to go view a TED Talk. A TED Talk of at least 16 minutes. And as you're watching it, and you pick whichever one you want, there's lots of them that are at least 16 minutes, right? On any topic that you wish. Because you're going to record who is giving the TED Talk and when it was given and so on. And you're going to take notes during the TED Talk as you watch it. You're going to take notes trying to evaluate that TED Talk based on ethos, pathos, and logos. So you're going to try to use those criteria, and you are going to develop, and you could call it a short paper, a long essay, something like that. The description in the assignment says it has to be at least 2 pages. And I think it's going to certainly be like 3 pages at least, but it would be 2 pages would be pretty darn tight. But so don't think, it's going to be like that short, but that would be a minimum for sure. And for some people, it'd be 3 or 4 pages, be more common. So you're going to use those notes to try to analyze the presentation, saying good things and bad things. I mean, being some things you'll be critical about, some things you'll be praising. How do they develop their ethos? How do they develop their pathos? How do they develop their logos? What things do they do that work, make them better, make them worse, right? And in case of ethos, I want you to actually try to determine from your analysis, this is just your personal analysis, what is the initial ethos? What is the derived ethos? What is the terminal ethos? And you're going to explicitly mention these things. So you're not just going to generally talk about the credibility of the person. You're going to talk about ethos, and then you're going to talk about pathos and logos. So you're going to have an introduction in your essay. It's going to tell me who spoke and what you generally thought about it, right? And then you're going to have paragraphs, at least 1 paragraph for ethos, 1 paragraph from logos, 1 paragraph from pathos. And ethos might have more than 1 paragraph, and the others might also, I suppose. But they're going to be in those kind of chunks, right? And then you're going to have a conclusion too. And another reason to do it sooner rather than later is that, well, there'll be lots of other stuff we're doing, but if you have time, you will have the opportunity to do a second version of this essay for extra credit later in the semester. It'll be a little different. I'll give it to you in the future sometime after this. People have already been finishing this first one, but that will be something that will be offered as an extra credit assignment with a little twist, little difference. So, okay, you let me talk and talk and talk, and nobody asked any questions, but what's new, I guess. That's my spiel about ethics and then into ethos and giving you yet another assignment. And you've got the background now you need for and repeated collage presentation, quotation presentation as those are building up. Do you have any questions for me? Okay. If you haven't picked up those handouts, please think about doing it. It'll help you out to have them on paper. Otherwise, again, I look forward to seeing you all for our in-person class and then the rest of the in-person semester. I don't stress a lot of feedback and discussion necessarily on Zoom, which is what it is, but do expect you will be more, need to be more in the classroom when we get in person. So please be prepared to react and discuss someone. I don't have anything else for you. I just applaud the amount of endurance you've had to sit through that whole thing for me. But in any case, if you don't have any questions for me now, go ahead and take off. If you if anything comes up, you want to talk about anything, I'm around, so let me know, okay? And work on those presentations. If anybody wants to stay after and talk, you have anything else you want to talk to me in smaller groups, you certainly may. Otherwise, I'll see you later.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
I have one thing.
So you showed up a little late, Brandon. Did you have some
Yep, again.
tech issues?
Yeah, pretty much.
I don't recall when it was that you actually came.
It was like 30 minutes into the class.
There's a couple people, well, maybe only one person who couldn't be here because of travel.
Yeah.
I'm going to turn off the recording now.